Hey, have you noticed all of the evil, all of the corruption, the hate, the dysfunction going around you, maybe even in you? I'm suggesting today that when evil is present, you need to rebuke it. Evil needs to be confronted. In our culture, confrontation is difficult. I'm going to read to you a couple of verses in the Bible, written a couple of maybe 2,500 years ago, that are pretty clear that God rebukes evil, that God doesn't tolerate evil. The Bible says this, Proverbs chapter 6, verse 22, when you walk God's commands, what's right, will guide you. When you sleep, God's commands will watch over you. When you awake, God's commands will talk to you. For the commandment, God's commands, is a lamp, and the teaching is light. And then the last part of verse 23 says that God rebukes, and that's the way of life, to keep you from all forms of evil. In other words, God rebukes you and me to protect us against evil. Not only does God rebuke evil, but God rebukes us when we engage in evil. This is Walk and Talk 198, February 15th, and I'm just simply exploring that evil must be rebuked. When we ignore God, we do evil. And the Bible is simply saying that God rebukes us, God corrects us, God admonishes us, God punishes us when we choose to ignore God and go down the path of evil. Many individuals could be classified as lawlessness. It's almost like in America, it has become the wild, wild west, where anybody and everybody pretty much wants to do whatever they want, and they ignore boundaries of the law, or they ignore boundaries of authority, and they become lawless. They are without laws. They literally want to go down a path that's anti-God. I'm suggesting to you, stop evil in your life, or God will rebuke you. I'm gently reminding you, you need to be rebuked if you're embracing evil, if you're promoting evil. Evil, based upon the Bible, is anything that doesn't agree with God. If God says that's evil, then that's evil. Evil is defined by something that is anti-God, anti-Bible. Yesterday, I read an article that at a parade in Kansas, celebrating the Super Bowl victory by the Kansas City football team to the Chiefs, at a parade, one or two or three individuals pulled out guns. One person was killed, and something like over 20 individuals were injured before citizens basically wrestled the shooter, the alleged shooter, to the ground, and then police engaged. Somewhere in our life, we have decided to flip. Good is no longer recognized as good. Evil triumphs. I'm just reminding you that God corrects, God rebukes. When you or I go down a path toward evil, and you may choose to disagree with what the Bible says as right versus wrong, good versus evil. You might choose to do it your way, your life. I'm gently reminding you that rebuke, according to Proverbs chapter 6, verse 23, rebuke from God is the way of life. I'm reminding you that as you embrace evil, whatever is anti-God, God rebukes you. God corrects you. And that's discipline against you for your own good. God is trying to instruct you. God is trying to help you understand. Don't go down that path, that evil path, or you'll get rebuked. We live day to day within boundaries. Those boundaries are set by God. Correct, many individuals choose not to go down a path of godliness or virtue based upon the Bible. And what they find is, as they proceed down that path, God rebukes them. I don't know exactly when and where and how God will rebuke you if you're participating, embracing forms of evil. Proverbs 6:23 says all forms of evil. You may not like that. You may disagree and say that's not evil. I'm simply saying to you that you're not God. God decides right from wrong, and God decides rebuke. Rebuke is necessary. We all need correction. Let me give you some practical suggestions. Number one, if you keep banging your head against the wall, you're going to get a headache. If you continue to, like me, I like Dunkin' Donuts, but if you continue to pig out on Dunkin' Donuts, you're going to find a problem. Every individual has to restrain. The Bible has a phrase, everything in moderation. I'm gently saying there's right and wrong, and individuals have to self-control, restrain, pull back from doing anything that is evil. God's rebuke is clear in this passage and throughout the Bible. God rebuked Adam and Eve because they chose to be independent. You can go right on down the Bible and you can see one rebuke after another, all the way to the book of Revelation. God corrects, God reproves, God punishes. If we're walking down an evil path, God rebukes. Let me give you another practical suggestion. If life is not going well for you, if you're banging your head against the wall and you're getting a headache, if you're finding dysfunction, if you're choosing to become God and ignore God's boundaries of good versus evil or right versus wrong based upon what God says is good and what God says is right or evil or wrong, then you're going to continue down a cycle and just recycling rebuke and correction. You can go down a path honoring to God, but you must choose to walk away from evil. If that means controlling the words out of your mouth, you need to discipline what you say. If that means not embracing a particular friendship or relationship just simply because of the dysfunction or the evil in that relationship, then don't engage. If you find yourself compromising, if the words out of your mouth are twisted, slanderous, deceitful, corrupt, then the Bible's simply saying that rebuke is on the way, and that God rebukes to discipline us, to teach us avoid evil. Evil is a result of people like Adam and Eve choosing to disregard, to ignore God's boundaries. All throughout history and civilization, people want to go down a path, they want to do life with complete disregard to the Bible. I'm gently saying the Bible is the number one supreme book on right versus wrong, on good versus evil, that Jesus Christ delivers to us forgiveness and says, don't keep going down the path of evil. Let me give you another quick suggestion. If the people around you are participating in evil, it's quite likely you need to disconnect and take a step back, or you will find yourself becoming a participant. You will engage. You will, the Bible calls it idolatry. The Bible calls it rebellion. Most of us don't like the idea that we can rebel against God. There is no God. We don't like it. And most of us don't like the idea that we should have boundaries. Most of us want literally to be able to do whatever we want. The Bible says, Proverbs chapter 6, verses 22 through 23 says, there are laws that are called commandments, and God uses these commandments to keep us safe from evil. And when we ignore God's laws, there's rebuke. Rebuke from God is a way of life to keep you from all forms of evil. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 23. This is Walk and Talk 198. I'm encouraging you to step into the goodness of God, not the evil of humanity. Follow God. If God is correcting you or rebuking you, admit what you're doing wrong. And if people around you want to participate in evil, take a step back. Look up. Remember, rebuke is coming. And remember that justice has to occur. We live in a culture that wants to reject God and be God. And God is saying in Proverbs chapter 6, verse 23, that the commandments of God is a lamp. The teaching of God is light. And when you choose to ignore God's commandments, rebuke is coming. One could even argue that rebuke, God's rebuke, is a part of life. The Bible says it's a way of life. And it's designed, God's rebuke, God's correction, God's justice, to remind you of boundaries, to remind you of right versus wrong, to remind you you're not God. This is Walk and Talk 198, February 15th. I want to encourage you, join us for worship this coming Sunday, 9:30 and 11 worship services. Bible classes at the same time for all ages. We have a very special auction coming up in another week or so for raising funds to encourage teenagers to study the Bible, to go on missions trips, to engage in following God. We want to encourage you, get in a small group, study the Bible. Remember, evil will be rebuked by God. And if you're participating in evil, admit it. Step back. Look up. Identify your behavior, your words, and confess it. This is a great day to just enjoy a morning walk, and I